The calendar read March 11th, 2017, a Saturday afternoon in Albuquerque, New Mexico. At a rehearsal space called Desert Sound on 4th Street, a four-piece band called Meridian was setting up for a 3-hour session when an old man walked through the front door carrying a guitar case held together with 2 bungee cords and a strip of electrical tape. The band's lead guitarist said something. The drummer laughed. The bass player looked at the floor, because he was the only one who felt something shift when he heard it. And the man in the mustard-yellow linen shirt sitting in the corner chair had not moved. But his eyes had. Desert Sound had been a tire warehouse in a previous life. The ceilings were high and the acoustics were wrong, and the owner, a man named Gil, had covered every wall with moving blankets staple-gunned at the corners, green, gray, and one faded burgundy someone had written on in silver marker. The floor was bare concrete. The air smelled of amplifier heat and old carpet and cleaning solvent. 4 rooms. Room 1 was for full bands. Rooms 2, 3, and 4 were practice cells, each just wide enough for a chair and a music stand. Gil ran the desk at the front behind a Dutch door with the bottom half always closed. He had owned Desert Sound for 18 years. He could hear through a wall what kind of player was in which room. That Saturday afternoon, Room 1 was booked from noon to 3 by Meridian. Meridian had been playing together 2 years. Jake, on lead guitar, 28, worked a graphic design job he didn't talk about. The easy confidence of someone who had been told enough times that he was talented and had started to receive it as fact. Marcus on drums, 25, loud by nature, louder by instrument. Dev on bass, 26, quiet, grew up on his father's record collection, had opinions he rarely voiced. Caitlin on keys, methodical, always on time. They were good, not yet great. Jake felt the ceiling most days without having words for it, something in the playing that was technically right and emotionally approximate. He worked harder than most people his age. That was part of what made the ceiling difficult. He thought the problem was outside him. He had not yet understood that this was the problem. The old man arrived at 12:17. Brown hard-shell case, the original finish worn to the substrate in patches. 2 mismatched latches, 1 silver, 1 brass, replacing originals that had failed at separate times. Electrical tape along the seam. 2 bungee cords crossing the body. A luggage tag with handwriting no longer legible. The man carrying it was 70 years old. Slight, careful in his movements. Gray corduroy jacket softened by use. Dark slacks pressed that morning. Leather shoes maintained past the point of being good shoes into the point of being cared for. His name was Walter. He stopped at Gil's desk, and Gil looked at the case and said, "You're in 4. Last door on the left." Walter thanked him and went down the hall. Jake came out to the hallway to get something from the van. Walter passed him. Jake looked at the case. The bungee cords. The 2 different latches. "That thing stay closed?" he said. Walter looked at him. He nodded. He kept walking. Jake went back to room 1. He said something to Marcus. Marcus laughed. Brief, already moving on. Dev looked at the door. He did not say anything. He picked up his bass. In the corner of room 1, in the chair by the water cooler that Gil kept there for guests, a man in a flat black hat sat with a water bottle on the floor beside him. He had been there when Meridian arrived. Caitlin had been told by Gil that an old friend might sit in, and she had said fine and forgotten to mention it to the others. The man in the hat was simply there, the way furniture is there after a while. Registered once, and then not again. Nobody had asked his name. His left foot rested flat on the floor. It had not yet begun to keep time. But here is the thing about Walter. Walter Reyes had spent 43 years repairing guitars. He had opened his shop, Reyes Guitar Repair, in Albuquerque's North Valley in 1974. In a space that had been a barber shop, working from a single bench, with tools his father had brought from Chihuahua. His father was not a luthier. He was a carpenter who understood wood, and he had passed that understanding the way things are passed, without formal lessons, through proximity, through watching, through the moment when a hand guides your hand and then lifts away and doesn't come back. Walter had repaired thousands of instruments. His reputation ran from Santa Fe to El Paso among the people who cared about such things. He didn't advertise. He had never needed to. His waiting list had been 8 months long for 22 years. He had retired 14 months ago. His hands had begun to trouble him. Not badly. Not enough to stop the work, but enough to make him afraid of what might happen if he stayed, and the trouble grew. He could not bear the thought of making a mistake on someone else's instrument, so he had closed the shop. He had gone home and told his wife Gloria he was done, and she had said she was glad because she wanted him at dinner again, and they had sat together that evening and not talked about it, because the sitting together said what needed to be said. He had not played much since. His hands remembered. But when you spend 40 years repairing an instrument for other people, playing it yourself sometimes feels like wearing a coat that belongs to someone else. What had brought him to Desert Sound was his grandson Tom's, who was 9 and wanted to learn guitar, and who had asked his grandfather to show him some things. Walter had taken the case from the closet. He had restrung the guitar. He had spent an hour at the kitchen table adjusting the action. He wanted to play through it in a room with good acoustics before Saturday's lesson, and the house was too small and too quiet. He had booked room 4. He had not been in a room with other musicians in 14 months. He set the case on the floor of room 4. He unhooked the bungee cords. He pressed both latches and lifted the lid. The guitar inside was a 1961 Gibson ES 335 in cherry red. The finish darkened over 50 years toward burgundy. The neck was original. The frets had been replaced twice by Walter's own hands, same gauge wire each time, measured from the originals so the feel would not change. The tuning machines were Grover's from 1978, installed when the original Clusons failed. The pickguard had a small crack at the lower horn that Walter had stabilized with a drop of thin adhesive in 1993 and had not touched since. He had bought the guitar in 1971 from a musician passing through who needed money. He had given him what he had, which was not what it was worth, but was more than anyone else had offered. He lifted it out. He sat on the stool. He played one chord and listened to the decay. Through the wall, Meridian had started their session. Walter played for 40 minutes. No amplification. The guitar's natural voice, the resonance of the hollow body, the sound that existed only in the room around him. He played things he had played for 40 years, and things that had no name. He played one passage 3 times because the third time landed differently than the first, and he wanted to understand why. At the edge of his attention, he could hear Meridian through the wall. The drummer was loud. The guitarist was skilled. There was something in the playing that was almost what it needed to be. He had heard that quality for 43 years. He knew what it was. It was the sound of someone playing what they knew rather than listening for what the song was asking. The difference was small. It was everything. He came out at 1:15 to use the water fountain. The door to room 1 was propped open with a road case. He drank and straightened up. He heard Meridian stop. Jake came out of room 1. He saw Walter. He looked past him, toward the open door of room 4, toward the case on the floor with the lid up. He walked down the hall. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the ES 335 on the stool. His expression changed. "Is that a 335?" he said. 61, Walter said. Jake leaned in the frame. He looked at it the way someone looks at a thing when they are revising a judgment and do not want to admit they are revising it. "That play? It plays. Can I see it? Here is something I want to ask you before we go any further. Has anyone ever made their mind up about you before you opened your mouth? Tell me in the comments. I read every one." The man in the flat black hat had come into the hallway. He stood at the water cooler end with his bottle in his hand, not going anywhere. Walter crossed to the stool, picked up the ES 335, and handed it to Jake. Jake took it with both hands. He looked at the neck. He pressed a finger at the 7th fret and listened to the sustain. He looked at the tuning machines, the pickguard crack. "Who repaired this?" "I did." You're a luthier? Retired, North Valley. 43 years. Jake looked up. I've heard of a Walter Reyes. Guitar repair, North Valley. Walter said that was him. Jake was quiet for a moment. He turned the guitar slowly. Behind him in the doorway, the man in the flat black hat had moved a step closer. Can I play it? Jake said. Walter nodded. Jake sat on the stool. He plugged into the little house champ in the corner, volume at 2. He settled the guitar on his knee. He played the opening figure from the song Meridian had been working on. D minor, medium tempo. Something he had written that had never quite resolved the way he wanted. He played it the way he always played it. He stopped after 16 bars. He looked at the guitar. He played it again. Something was different. Not in the notes, in the response. The hollow body giving him the sustain back with warmth in it. Something round and present that he had spent 6 months chasing with his pedal chain, and that was simply in this wood, waiting. He had not known a guitar could answer him this way. He had been playing solid body instruments since he was 14. He played the figure a third time. He let the chord ring. He let the room hold the sound and return it. His hands slowed down. They were listening. Marcus was in the doorway. Then Caitlin. Then Dev. Nobody spoke. Jake lifted his hands. The last chord died in the air. He sat still. What changed? The voice came from the doorway. Quiet. The man in the flat black hat. Jake looked at him. He looked at the guitar. I listened to it, he said. He said it the way you say something when you realize it as you're saying it. The man in the hat nodded. He looked at Walter. Walter looked at the bracelets, the turquoise ring, the shirt, the hat. Something crossed his face. The man in the hat said, I've been coming to this part of the city for 20 years when I'm in Albuquerque, trying to find who did the repair work on a guitar I brought in here in 2001. Walter was still. Taylor 814, Carlos said. Stress crack at the upper bout. Someone fixed it so clean that 3 people looked afterward and couldn't find the seam. Walter remembered it. He remembered every repair that required something of him. That one had taken 2 days and a piece of spruce he had been keeping since 1988. That was mine, Walter said. Carlos reached into his shirt pocket. The old pick, edges worn smooth by decades of use. He held it out. I've been carrying this since Woodstock. I always meant to give it to the hands that did that repair. He looked at Walter. I just didn't know whose hands they were. Walter looked at the pick in Carlos's palm. He looked at Carlos's face. I can't take that, he said. My guitar has been on every stage I've stood on since 2001, Carlos said. That repair is part of every note it's played. The person who did that work should have something that went to those stages. He kept his hand out. Please, Walter reached out. He took the pick. He held it flat in his palm. He looked at it. He did not speak for a moment. I retired 14 months ago, he said finally. My hands. Carlos looked at his hands. Weathered, careful, the hands of someone who had spent 40 years asking wood what it needed. Those aren't finished hands, Carlos said. Jake had set the ES-335 gently on the stool. He looked at Walter. I'm sorry, he said. Earlier in the hall. Simple. No explanation. Because no explanation would have made it the right size. Walter looked at him. He put the pick in his jacket pocket, over his heart. You didn't know, he said. No, but I should have. Walter looked at him for a moment. He nodded. That was the end of it. Carlos tilted his hat brim. He picked up his water bottle from the floor. He looked at the ES-335 on the stool. That guitar has been listened to, he said. You can hear it. He walked down the hall. He went through the front door. Cold air came in. The door swung shut behind him. In the van on the way back, Marcus turned the radio on and turned it off. Dev looked out the window. Jake drove. At a light on 4th Street, he said, the D minor thing. I've been playing the changes instead of the song. Nobody answered. Dev nodded once, slowly, without looking away from the window. Jake drove. 6 weeks later, Walter got a call from a guitar shop on Central Avenue. Vintage archtop, structural crack. Their regular luthier booked out 4 months. His name had come up. Walter drove over. He looked at the instrument. He asked 2 questions. He ran a finger along the top seam and stopped at the right spot without being told. He told them what it needed. The owner asked if he could do it. Walter thought about his hands. He thought about what Carlos had said about his hands. "I can do it," he said. 3 days. The repair was invisible. He knew it was finished because he could not find it himself. He reopened the shop the following month. 3 days a week. The waiting list filled in 11 days. Tom's came on Saturdays. Walter showed him the chords one at a time, the way his father had shown him. No lessons, just proximity, just the hand over the hand and the hand lifting away. The ES-335 stood on a stand in the corner of the shop. Not for sale, not for display, just there, the way an old thing is there when it has earned the right to be in the room. There are things that look finished that are not finished. There are cases held together with bungee cords that carry something nobody in the room is prepared for. The laugh cost nothing and said everything. What came after it was the story. On this channel, we make videos to carry what lives inside Carlos Santana's heart to the next generation. If this story moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Let's close with something Carlos Santana once said. "The guitar is not the music. The music is what happens between the player and the instrument when both of them are finally willing to listen."